My formal training as an academic didn't really involve any explicit instruction on professional data management, on relational databases. But the more I've learned, the more I think that the demands of modern scientific projects can really lend themselves to relational databases. So first, to talk a little bit about those demands and data management. I'll say, we're all familiar with these very rich, complex data sets, multimodal. And then as scientists, we're trained to understand how these sort of methods and concepts fit together. Animal, session, behavior, neuronal recordings, maybe pre-processing parameters, some form of pre-processed data, and then the statistics that end up in a publication. We understand the relationship to each other, that from a given experimental session, we get both behavioral and neuronal data that later converges at the point of analysis in some sort of synchronization method. That mental model doesn't really map on to our reality of managing a file hierarchy, where each of these things just sort of ends up in a bucket of different, zip file of different individual pieces fit together. Maybe you have notes on paper, notes in a master spreadsheet that gives some sort of meta information about each of the sessions, notes on which sessions are worth keeping versus not. I learned over time some best practices in terms of standards for naming files, standards for being able to navigate a hierarchy that was predictable. But even the best hierarchy will still have to make some decisions about which levels of organization to prioritize. So in this example, I'm organizing based on subject as that top level, and then session gets split within it. My neuronal data might be here at the session level with some pre-processed data attached. That analysis ID is hopefully associated somewhere else or here in this file system with a unique set of parameters that produced that analysis, or those pre-processing or the pre-processed data there. There are the sacrifices in terms of the decision to use some other software package that DeepLabCut, for example, might demand a file hierarchy unto itself that doesn't fit with some project convention that might be common to you or your lab. We're then sort of faced with sort of the day-to-day of navigating this file system and sharing these details with others. So to select based on a criteria, I have to comb through directories. I have to reference my notes about session metadata. To perform a new analysis, I have to check the analysis ID and how that maps on to a set of carefully taken notes about what went on there. To track the relationships between these different levels of hierarchy requires a lot of documentation, and like sharing that documentation with collaborators who have to navigate this file structure themselves. Relational databases offer a lot that help us avoid some of those pitfalls and difficulties with particularly larger file sets. So in a relational database, we can organize a set of tables around the concepts we have about our data. So here, each of these nodes represents a table itself for subject, session, video recording, maybe a pose estimation model. And then this is what a subject table might look like, where you have a unique identifier for your subject, represented by an asterisk here, and then additional information you might want to know about that subject. That unique information cascades down through these child table relations, where my unique identifier also appears in the video recording table, as well as a unique identifier for video recording. If I decide, for example, that that first subject isn't worth keeping, maybe my protocol wasn't fully figured out yet, and I delete that subject, the nature of this database is that delete cascades through each of my other tables, and that I'm not going to have that subject accidentally end up in an analysis where it shouldn't. I can also pair this video recording information with my pose estimation model. So each of my unique models then gets matched with a recording ID. And then I have a table that maybe it's all of my recording sessions with the same model, or many different models all compared against the same recording session to see which model I want to end up using for the entire project. A feature that DataJoint adds on top of this relational database structure is to pair the relationship between two tables with a set of computations. So in defining the pose estimation table, I might define this populate process that takes information from the task table into actual pose estimation, where I have the XY frame coordinates for that pose. By centralizing a database, we're also making collaboration that much easier, because just by sharing credentials to the database, I can allow someone access VPN, local complications permitting. Another thing that DataJoint supports on top of this collaboration process inherent to relational databases is reserving jobs. So if I have multiple populate jobs that need to happen or that can happen, I can, in one place on one machine with Python, start that populate, and that will reserve that job for me until it completes. Someone else can at the same time run that populate command in their MATLAB instance of DataJoint and be populating at the same time. So on top of, in addition to the standard offerings of a relational database, DataJoint offers these things like populate and distributed computing, but taken together, a lot of these things really mitigate the complications of using a file system. Instead of manually combing directories, you can use just a single command to collapse across tables and get the restriction that you're looking for. To generate a new analysis, you decided the old one isn't worth keeping, that delete can cascade, or the unique identifier for that analysis still cascades down through whichever stage of the process. Distributed computation by reserving jobs can be automatic, and then we just naturally keep the relationship between these tables. By having a centralized database, we can also share access from wherever. So I'd invite you to try out DataJoint for yourself. We have a Jupyter environment that will help you get started. I'd also welcome your questions in the comments below or at my email.